only 26.1% of the global seafloor had been mapped with modern high-resolution technology that can reveal it in great detail. In fact, the surface of Mars and the surface of the Moon, we have better maps of Mars and the Moon than we do of the ocean floor. I worked for a guy this summer who was in the Navy, and he was telling me some experiences that he had. And he was assigned or stationed, I don't know what the word is for that, on a nuclear submarine that traveled all over the world doing military maneuvers and scientific research and all kinds of things. They accidentally rammed that submarine into something under the water because they didn't have good enough maps. He said there aren't, most of the ocean floor is not mapped with enough detail. They limped back to their base and they were okay, but it just shows that there are things down there that we don't know about.
Yeah, there is.
We have maps of the ocean floor. Some of them are in fairly good detail. But the instruments that they make those maps with don't tell us anything about the things that live down there. In order to find out about the things that live down there, we have to send people, or at least cameras, down there to study whatever is going on. Here we have a chart showing the different depths of the ocean, and you can see at the top, there's the, what do they call it up there? The sunlight zone. That's where sunlight can penetrate. Only the first, well, they have it in meters there, but that's about the first 600 or 700 feet. That sunlight shines down into the water. After that, the sunlight gets kind of vague, and there's the twilight zone down to about 3,000 feet. And then below that is the midnight zone. There is no sunlight that gets to that area below 3,000 feet. So in order to study that area, they have to send down remote controlled things with big searchlights and all that kind of stuff. And people, scuba divers, can only get down a few hundred feet. So most of that is way beyond what scuba divers can get to. And there's some pretty harsh conditions down there. The water pressure at the average depth of about 12,000 feet, the water pressure there is 5,400 pounds per square inch. That's like having a half-ton pickup, the whole weight of a half-ton pickup parked on your big toe. That's what would happen to you if you got down to that depth. It would just crush you. And if you got down to the deepest part, it's even worse. We'll get to that. South of Japan, some few hundred miles, is what's called the Mariana Trench. That's the deepest part of the ocean. And you can see that in black letters there. And then there's the little red words there for the Challenger Deep. Well, the Mariana Trench is about 1,600 miles long and only about 43 miles wide, but it's 35,000 feet deep. That's almost 7 miles deep. And the Challenger Deep is the deepest part of that, and that they've measured that. It goes down to 35,876 feet. The water pressure at that deepest part is 15,750 pounds per square inch. They compare that to 100 elephants standing on your head. So, scientists estimate that there might be as many as 2.5 million different species of creatures living in the ocean. And that's not including the one-celled microorganisms. That's just fish and anemones and algae and all that other stuff. The the one-celled microorganisms stuff, there's multiple millions of those. Only about 250,000 of those 2.5 million have been discovered and described, and only about 2,000 are added each year. So we have a long way to go to learn about everything that's down there. So if we think about all the different plants and animals and everything that's on the land, plus what's in the water, there are estimates. Scientists speculate that there might be as many as 390 million different living creatures, different kinds of living creatures on this earth. 390 million different kinds. So we're going to take a trip down into the ocean. We're going to look at some of the creatures that are down there. And, since there's millions of them, this is only a tiny sample. We have jellyfish. You can call them jellies. That's kind of another term for it. Are mainly free-swimming marine animals, although some of them will kind of tether themselves to something, and so they don't move around very much, but most of them are free-swimming. They have the umbrella-shaped main body that's called the bell, and then they have their tentacles that stream out beyond that. And they range in size from this little guy that is only about 1 millimeter across to this one. They have found one like this. This is called the lion's mane jelly. They found one back in the 1800s that was 7 feet across on that bell part, and its tentacles were 120 feet long. Here's a few examples. Jellyfish are found all over the world and in all depths of water. Some pretty interesting things there. I don't even know the names of all of them. This one up here on the right-hand corner is called the egg yolk jellyfish, and you can see why. The Argonaut looks like a chambered nautilus, but they're not the same. This is a type of squid, and they build a permanent shell that they live in, and you've probably seen some of those shells when they slice them in half, and they have all the little chambers going around a spiral. Well, going back to the Argonaut, this is actually an octopus, and it builds the shell not for its own protection, but to protect its eggs. And that shell is really, really thin. It's paper thin. You can almost see through it. And each kind of Argonaut has their own style of shell that they make. Since they float around in the water instead of living on the bottom like other octopuses do, they have that shell for their eggs and their little ones because they don't have a hole in the ground or something like that to hide them in. So they carry their babies around with them. And they say that the female Argonaut can be carrying as many as 170,000 eggs at one time. And and when they're born, then they go off on their own. Okay, here's another one. This one is called the giant isopod. It's a scavenger that lives on the ocean floor, anywhere from 500 feet down to about 8,000 feet down. They're related to the wood louse. Now, if you've ever been out in the woods and disturbed an old rotten log or something, and there's little bugs that go skittering off, those are probably wood louse. They're only about this big. Well, this guy is, let's see here. They can be up to 20 inches long. And you see down in the left-hand corner, somebody is holding one. They got 7 pairs of legs, and they have a hard shell on the outside. They can roll up into a ball, kind of like an armadillo can for protection. And they have big eyes that have 4,000 facets. So it's multiple eyes. They've been known to survive up to 5 years without food. And when they do get food, they may gorge themselves so full that they can't move. So it's kind of like feast or famine. This one is called the Dumbo octopus. And I've never seen the Disney movie Dumbo, but that's what they named this one after because of his ears. Those aren't actually ears, but they're fins to swim with. They live between 9,800 and 13,000 feet below the surface. They only grow to about 8 inches long. Living in the deep ocean is cold and dark, and finding a mate can be quite a challenge. Female Dumbo octopuses, however, have a clever trick. They carry eggs at different developmental stages everywhere they go. So if they happen to meet a male octopus, they can have the eggs that are at the most appropriate growth stage fertilized, and then they have other eggs left over, so that, you know, it's kind of a random thing that they happen to run into male and female together. But, you know, when they do, they're prepared, and they can be fertilized and have little ones then. Interesting. Here is a sea angel. It's actually a type of snail that doesn't have a shell. Swims around with its little wings there. It kind of flutters around through the ocean. Okay. I think it's working. All right, there we go. So their bodies are transparent, and you can see some of their internal organs there. And some of them even glow. Oops. I'll lay that one down for now. Okay. Oh, it is working? Okay. All right. We'll go back to that one. If I can get it clipped on properly. Okay. Okay. We'll go on here.
How big is the sea?
The sea angel, I think it's quite small, probably only about 3 or 4 inches long. Here we have what's called nudibranchs. And that word nudibranch means naked gills. Their breathing apparatus is outside of their body. But there's all kinds of different ones. There's like 3,000 different species of these. Most of them live pretty deep in the ocean, 2,000 to 8,000 feet down. And they glide around on the bottom of the ocean, kind of like a snail does. They're like almost like a snail without a shell. And here's some more. Pretty incredible, all the colors and shapes and everything there. And some of them have the interesting eating habit of attacking the Portuguese man of war, which is the most poisonous creature in the ocean. They will actually attack them and eat them, but they absorb the poison cells from the man of war, and that protects their own body then. And they come in all sizes and all kinds of color combinations. Here's another interesting one. This is another, they call it a sea slug, but it's called a California sea owl. It's like a snail without a shell, and it crawls around on the bottom of the ocean and eats almost anything that it finds. Some of these, I'll mention, some of these I don't have much information on because the scientists don't know much about them. You know, they go and they get a picture of it, but they don't know much about it. Anyhow, so it's just one of those interesting creatures. Here are some really cute ones. The Christmas tree worms. They're only about 1.5 inches long, but they'll burrow into coral, and they'll make a little tube inside the coral sometimes 10 inches long, but their body is only about 1.5 inches long, and if they feel threatened, they'll pull themselves down into that tube, and they put a little cap on top to close it up so that nothing can get them. But these frilly things of all colors here are their eating and breathing mechanisms. And there, again, there's, I don't know how many different kinds. And let's see here. It says they live in water less than 100 feet deep, and they can live up to 40 years. How would you like to meet something like that? That's called the telescope fish. The telescope fish. He's only about 8 inches long, but he has a big head, and his eyes are like tubes. And I got another picture here. And he kind of sits in the water with his eyes pointing up because he lives in the really deep water, anywhere from 1,600 to 10,000 feet down. And so it's totally dark down there. But he looks up, and if there's any tiny amount of light coming from above, his eyes, he's got really big eyes, so he can take in quite a bit of light. So even if it's really dim light, he can see a little bit. But he hunts upward, and he can snap his mouth open and grab things. And he's got some pretty big teeth there. And so, getting back to his eyes and his mouth there, he's a pretty formidable hunter. Okay. Now, these guys, starfish. It says they're the most common type of marine life to be encountered. There are over 1,900 species. They can live as deep as 20,000 feet under the surface of the ocean, and they can live in warm tropical water or in icy water. And they come in all sizes and all colors. The one up in the right-hand corner here is only about 1/4 inch in diameter. And they go all the way from 5 legs and, several inches across up to 15 legs and up to 40 inches in diameter. They don't have a brain, but they have a very complex network of nerves and an amazing problem-solving ability. They can figure things out. They have eye spots on the tips of each of their arms that allow them to see light and movement and navigate in their surroundings. And you can see the variety of colors there.
I heard it that they lose a limb and can grow back.
Yeah, if something bites off one of their arms, or whatever you call it, a leg or an arm, they can regrow it. And they can live as long as 30 years or more. Incredible colors and patterns and everything. There's some more. Here we have a rather formidable little creature. It's called the Japanese porcupine crab. Lives off the coast of Japan at depths from 660 feet to 6,600 feet. I'd hate to try to grab a hold of him. Here's another one. This one is called the fang tooth. And this kind of fish, there's only like 2 different species of this kind of fish, but they have the largest teeth compared to the size of the rest of their body of any known fish. But they're not much of a threat to people because they're very small. They're only about 6 inches long. And they live in the deepest parts of the ocean, as deep as 16,000 feet.
Put a hurt on you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to stick my finger in his mouth.
How do they survive with like all the, as you said, the pressure per square inch?
Okay, fish that live close to the top have what's called a swim bladder. It's kind of something that they can, put more air or less air, or they make adjustments for what level they want to swim at. The really deep sea ones don't have that. And so the pressure doesn't crush them. If they're brought up from those really deep places, they sometimes don't survive. They might explode. Some of them do, some of them don't. Yeah. So, you know, they're meant to live deep. God designed them that way. You know, 16,000 feet, that's tremendous pressure down there.
I kind of wonder if God designed those.
Yeah, you know, for as ferocious and ugly as they look, you know, you kind of wonder. But anyway,
I do know Satan has named something before the flood.
but they're designed for where they live. Okay, here's some more beautiful stuff. Coral. It might look like a plant, but it's actually a type of animal. And it's actually a whole colony of little tiny creatures living together, and they'll start and they'll make a little shell of silica or calcium around themselves, and they make a whole colony of that, and the colony keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they have, I don't know how many different kinds there are here. It says there are 2,175 different identified species of coral. And here we have a few more examples. But they create those little tiny shells of calcium carbonate, and they keep adding to it and adding to it. And so the coral reefs get bigger and bigger, but they're being threatened by chemicals and all kinds of things. And so some of the coral reefs are disappearing, and it's because of human activity. Some of them get to be, you know, one, you can call it a plant, if it's not really a plant, but some of them can get to be 20 feet tall. So they come in all varieties. Here's another interesting fish. You've probably heard about the angler fish that has the little thing, a little lure hanging over its head that they can light up, and that lures other creatures in toward them. And then when the other little creature gets close enough, you can see a couple different varieties there. Here's an interesting one, the goblin shark. And this one lives really deep in the ocean, all the way down to 6,500 feet. And you know, that nose looks kind of awkward on there. When they're young, their nose is pretty big compared to the rest of their body. But as they grow, their body grows faster than the nose, and so then the nose kind of gets a little more in proportion. But that nose is pretty special because where they live, it's pretty dark. But inside that nose, I don't know if you call it a nose or whatever, but anyhow, inside that nose is an array of electroreceptors called ampullae of Lorenzini. That's a complicated word. But these little receptors in there can pick up real tiny electrical charges or impulses from other creatures. And so they can find other creatures in the total darkness from those little electrical impulses. And their mouth is unique. When they go to grab something, their jaws reach out and open really wide, and then they close it and pull their jaws back in. They can get up to 20 feet long. Okay, here's another unique one. It's called a hatchet fish, and it's named because of its shape. It looks kind of like a hatchet or a meat cleaver. There's about 40 different species ranging in size from 1 inch long up to 5 inches. So they're pretty small, but they have some interesting features. They live down from about 600 feet to 4,500 feet where it's totally dark. A lot of the creatures that live at that depth can make their own light. They have little cells that create light. This is another one that can make its own light. Here is what they look like from the front. Fortunately, they're pretty small. I'd hate to meet a big one like that. But they can make their light kind of like a firefly does. There's a chemical reaction that creates the light for them. And they have the really big eyes so that they can pick up more light, kind of like owls have big eyes so they can see better in the dark. Here's another unique one, the stoplight loose jaw. It's a pretty small fish, but it lives down where it's totally dark, down to 13,000 feet. And you can see just below its eye there is a, well, it looks like it's yellow there, but they say that it's actually a little red dot. Most deep sea creatures don't see red, but these guys can, it's almost like a little searchlight that's a red searchlight that gives them a little bit of light in front of them so they can look for their food without being seen. They also have a little green light just below that one. So that's why they call them a stoplight, red and green light.
That might be a thermal, that's a thermal image, but maybe that red is where it's heat.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You know, it's supposed to be a red light and a green light, but anyhow. And then they have this huge jaw that opens up, and so they can grab things that are bigger than themselves, and they have a big stomach. They can swallow big things.
How big did that one get?
That one is, I think they're only about 8 or 10 inches long. They're not very big. Here's kind of a cute one. And a lot of these names are just descriptive names. The pink bumpy snailfish. I mean, you know, the fish that we get in our streams and lakes, you know, we have the trout and the bass, you know, they have a name, but these are just named for what they look like. This one happens to have a little suction cup on its belly that it can attach itself to rocks or other fish or whatever. That's why they call it a snailfish, because it can kind of latch itself on. And these live down deep, usually about 11,000 feet, but they have actually found, they've taken pictures of them all the way down to 27,000 feet. Here's another one that has big eyes, the owlfish. It can find its prey in very low light or no light at all almost. They live down to 21,007 feet, and they only get about 8 inches long. I don't suppose there's very many really big creatures down that low because there's not very much food down there. You know, they have to get along with very little. There's another scary one, the viper fish. Its teeth are so long that if they weren't lined up right, they'd actually puncture their brain. But they go on the outside rather than on the inside. Some of them have a little lure on their front fin that they can put over the top of their mouth to lure other fish in. And then when they come in close, they grab them. They live down in the ocean about 700 down to 3,300 feet. And there again, they're a fairly small fish. Here's a lanternfish that can light himself up. And there's over 250 species of them known. They live down between 600 and 3,300 feet. It's so amazing, all these different varieties and colors and, you know. Here's a really unique one. It's called the barrel eye fish. Now, when you look at him, you think, well, yeah, he's interesting. I don't know if my laser shows it. This is kind of a membrane, a clear membrane over the top of his face. And those two little bubbles are his eyes. These two things out in front are his nose. And he can move his eyes all over the place.
I thought it was his brain at first.
Yeah. His eyes can rotate, allowing him to look upward or straight ahead. And he can sit motionless, and if something comes along, he can flash up there and get it. They live in the northeastern Pacific, up around Alaska, from 2,000 to 2,600 feet. And anyhow,
Wow.
unique creature. Sea cucumbers. These are kind of like, almost like snails. They're kind of a scavenger.
Not edible.
Yeah, they're not edible. They're not related to the cucumbers we get in our garden. But they go around scavenging on whatever floats down through the water to them. They live on the bottom. Some of them crawl around, others float and swim. There's some that, because they're pretty neutral in their buoyancy, they can jump off the bottom and they'll just kind of move up through the water, and then they just slowly settle back down again. And so they can move in different places by jumping. It's not a fast jump, but it gets them going, and then they just settle down somewhere else. All kinds of them. There's some more. There's about 1,800 different known species. One of their unique abilities is if they're threatened, they can shoot out their intestines, which taste really bad. And then if something gets lost, they can regenerate what's lost. Diatoms. You might have heard of diatomaceous earth that you can get in garden care centers. You sprinkle it on your plants and it'll kill the bugs and stuff. It's made of these little creatures. Yeah.
That's very cool. You can use it for your to keep the bugs away from your area where you put your dogs, and it's pet friendly.
Yeah.
Using sulfur, it's a little bit more pet friendly.
Yeah. But these little creatures make a calcium shell around their body. They're like one-celled. I think they're like a one-celled thing. They're really, really tiny. And then those shells can be ground up and make diatomaceous earth. So you're getting, this is almost like glass, actually. So it's like when you get diatomaceous earth, it's like ground up glass. And that's why it kills the bugs.
Yet it's not harmful to pets. You put a little on the food and it'll take care of worms.
Yeah, it can be used internally for pets. When I was farming, I used it in my grain. If there was any threat of getting bugs in the grain, you mix it with the grain and it kills the bugs in the grain. And it's not harmful to people. But these things come in incredible shapes and sizes and all kinds of things. These are some electron microscope pictures to show the intricate details in them. They're a single-celled algae. They're actually an algae. And most of them are microscopic. The biggest ones are about the size of a hair, the diameter of a hair. So that's only about 1,000th of an inch across. They live almost everywhere. They live in the ocean. They live in rivers and lakes. They live in the ground. They live in the ice around Antarctica. And they're just incredible little creatures. They have chlorophyll in their body so that they make use of sunlight. They take in carbon dioxide just like other plants. They use the carbon to make sugar for themselves, and they let off the oxygen for us to breathe. They say that 20 to 30% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from these little creatures because there are so many of them in the whole world. They say that the biomass, in other words, the total mass of these diatoms is more than all the tropical forests in the world. Oops. Just one thing more about the diatoms. They say that there are 20,000 to 2 million different varieties. A lot of variety there. Okay, hammerhead shark. They can get up to 20 feet long. They can weigh up to 1,000 pounds. The shape of their head, they have their eyes on the outer ends of those things there. And they also have the electrical receptors in their nose to pick up the electrical signals from other creatures. And so they're pretty efficient at finding their food. Their eyes allow them to see pretty much in a 360-degree range, except for right in front of their nose. Let's see here. They live all over the world, generally fairly shallow. They're very aggressive hunters, but they're pretty harmless to people. What do you say?
No, we were very cautious of them when we dived.
Really?
Oh, yeah, they're known, they'll take an arm or a leg in a heartbeat.
And they got a big mouth. Okay, what I read was that they're supposed to be harmless, but apparently not. Okay. Their babies are called pups, and they're born alive. And they're on their own. When they're born, they may stay together as a bunch of little ones, but the mother doesn't do anything for them. They are a fish.
Yeah.
They have the eggs inside the body, but the eggs hatch and then they're born as a live shark.
They'll swim in schools too.
Okay, yeah. They can live up to 30 years. So they're an interesting creature. Okay. I mentioned the Challenger Deep, the deepest place in the deepest part of the ocean. On April 29, 2019, Victor Vescovo went down in this machine right here called the limiting factor. He went down to the bottom to that very deepest part. And he set a world record for going the deepest. And he saw some interesting things down there and the deepest part of the ocean. You know, we had the picture of the sea cucumbers. He saw sea cucumbers down there. There were shrimp down there. And there was a little tiny sea anemone down there. This is actually a picture from the bottom of the ocean. But he saw something else that was rather disturbing. He saw a plastic bag down there at the bottom of the ocean and gum wrappers. That is not a good sign. We have this verse. We know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Our world is getting old and corrupted and worn out. And even though it's still beautiful, it's amazing how beautiful things are even after 6,000 years of sin. But it is wearing out. And it's failing. It's time we go home to a better land. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. Of all these incredible creatures, I'm just amazed at the variety and the imagination that God had when he made all these things. And that they all coordinate and work together and they all survive. If man didn't mess them up, they would be just fine. He doeth great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. And then I like this one. Eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. This is the Orion Nebula. Our deliverance is going to come through the Orion Nebula. And we're going to learn about that tomorrow night, right? Yeah. So we can look forward to something better coming. All right. Thank you.